They didn't know who she was, but they knew exactly who they thought she was. The revolving doors of the Lexmore Tower spun slowly as Naomi Wells stepped inside her heels, clicking once against the marble before the hush of high-rise air swallowed the sound. The lobby was dressed like money. Pale stone glass panels, backlit logos. Expensive, cold designed to impress, but not to invite. Naomi had walked into buildings like this 100 times before. Today was different. Not because she wasn't ready, she'd been ready for weeks, but because she knew this wasn't just another interview. It was a test, and not for her. She smoothed the front of her charcoal jacket, adjusted the gold watch on her wrist, and moved toward the reception desk with the kind of poise that can't be taught. Her resume was bulletproof, her record undeniable, but she wasn't naive. In this world, credentials didn't always speak louder than assumptions. The receptionist didn't smile, just blinked, looked her up and down, and asked her name like it was a challenge. Naomi Wells. "I'm here for the 10 a.m. with Mr. Garrettson." A moment of silence. The receptionist typed slowly, eyes flicking back to Naomi's face, then to her shoes. "One moment," she said flatly, picking up the phone. Her voice dropped to a murmur. Naomi stepped back and waited. The minutes passed like syrup in winter. 9:54, 9:15, 10:05. Nobody came. At 10:08, a man appeared. Tall, pale, maybe mid-40s, with an expensive suit and a look that hovered between confusion and dismissal. "Miss Wells," he asked, as though doubting the name matched the person. "Yes. I'm Brian Garrettson, head of brand operations." "Follow me." No handshake, no small talk. Just a silent walk across a sterile corridor that echoed with every step. The conference room looked like every other in the city, sleek, soulless, high-backed chairs too stiff to be comfortable. Inside, a second figure sat already. Leah Jennings, VP of Marketing. She didn't rise when Naomi entered, just offered a nod that felt more like a scan. "Let's begin," Leah said without preamble. The questions came sharp and fast, but they weren't really questions. Not about skill or leadership, not about strategy or vision. They were jabs hidden in professional tone. "Have you worked in a fast-paced, digital-first environment recently?" 2-year gap. "That's quite the pause. You didn't find time for contract work. Do you consider yourself aligned with Gen Z consumer expectations?" Naomi answered every line with calm precision, but she could hear what they weren't saying. She could feel what they thought she represented. Outdated, unfamiliar, maybe too much, or not enough of the right kind. Then Leah leaned back, eyes narrow. "And your last campaign, was that a solo initiative or part of a group effort?" "Just curious." Naomi smiled gently. "I led a team of 12. Our work resulted in a 22% revenue lift, quarter over quarter." Leah made a small note, lips pursed like someone tasting something she didn't expect to like. At 10:21, Garrettson closed his laptop. Unfortunately, he began this position was actually filled late last night through an internal recommendation. "Apologies for the confusion." Leah nodded with faux regret. "We'll keep your materials on file." No handshake, no offer to escort her out, just a motion to the door. Naomi didn't flinch. She stood, gathered her things, and walked out with the same elegance she entered with. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, is that someone was watching. Not from a resume. Not from a database, but from an observation suite 10 floors above, where every word of their conversation had been broadcast live through a secured feed. He saw how they looked at her. He heard the tone, the dismissals, the subtle erasure masked as professionalism. And he wasn't just an observer. He was the new chairman of Lexmore Strategic Partners. And Naomi Wells was his wife. The 10th floor was soundproofed, frosted glass, minimal decor, just enough to signal control. Not vanity. In the corner of the observation suite, Elias Monroe stood with both hands behind his back, eyes trained on a large screen split into 3 angles of the interview room below. He hadn't moved in the last 20 minutes. From his vantage point, he'd seen it all. The receptionist's smirk, the 8-minute delay, the limp excuses, and worse, their tone. The quiet disqualification that came wrapped in polite condescension. Elias said nothing, but his jaw had set the moment Naomi sat down. 3 days earlier, he'd finalized a private acquisition of Lexmore Strategic Partners, A deal that had taken 6 months of silence, NDA-enforced meetings, and a trail of anonymized investors. The official announcement wouldn't go out until next week, but Elias didn't care about PR timelines. He cared about truth. And this morning, this was the audit. No press releases. No red carpet. He didn't want staged greetings or performative diversity statements. He wanted raw behavior. Reflexes. Unfiltered instinct. And he got it. Naomi had asked to stay out of it. Said it might be too close, too personal, but he told her, "I need to see what they do when they think no one is watching." Now he had his answer. "Replay the last 5 minutes," he said calmly. Across the room, Anya, his legal strategy advisor, tapped a command into the console. The audio from the interview piped back. In this time slower, clearer. Leah's voice clipped and falsely casual. Brian's dismissal, and finally, Naomi's quiet walk toward the door. Elias didn't blink. He studied the rhythm of their speech, the inflections, the micro-hesitations, the performance of professionalism. When judgment had already been cast, "Pull the building feed, too," he added. "Lobby to room 7. I want timestamps." "Yes, sir." "And run their previous interview logs. Jennings and Garrettson, last 18 months. Look for hiring patterns, disparity markers, university bias, language trends." "You're expecting a pattern?" Elias turned to Anya with a half smile. "I already saw it in their posture." He stepped away from the monitor and walked to the tall windows. Chicago stretched wide, and humming below trains slicing between towers, steam rising from rooftop vents, a dozen lives moving every second. He could see so much from here. But today, what mattered most was what they thought they could hide. This wasn't just about Naomi. It never had been. He'd built his career watching corporations polish their outward image while the rot festered just beneath the surface. Lexmore had a stellar reputation. Fast growth, sleek branding, endless top employer lists. But look behind the curtain, and the leadership roster told another story. Same faces. Same feeder schools. Same thin curated culture paraded during annual reviews and town halls. What they hadn't expected was ownership with no appetite for illusion. His phone buzzed once. No name, just a single message. "She's back in the car." Elias tapped a short reply. "Tell her to wait. I'm not done yet." Then he walked to the console, pressed a button, and spoke with precision. "Have HR legal and brand risk in the South boardroom by 11:15. No agendas, no slides, just them." "Which HR lead?" Anya asked. "All of them." He glanced back at the screen. Naomi was gone now, but the weight of what had just happened hadn't left the room. Elias straightened the cuff of his sleeve, then reached for his jacket. "Time to clean house," he murmured. The boardroom was stark. No refreshments, no printed agendas. Just the soft hum of a ceiling vent and the slow tick of an analog clock mounted above a screen that hadn't been turned on. At 11:12, the door opened. 3 people stepped in, all carrying laptops, some with a flash of concern, others with the cool mask of executive routine. Behind them came Elias. Unrushed, silent, closing the door himself with a soft click that sounded more final than any gavel. He didn't sit. "Let's begin," he said simply. No one asked for what. Anya stood beside him, already projecting a split-screen report on the wall. The left side, a scroll of hiring records over the past 6 years. The right, a pattern. Map of candidate names, universities, zip codes, demographic indicators. Rosa Bennett from HR cleared her throat. "Is this part of the post-acquisition audit?" Elias's gaze didn't shift. "This is part of the culture audit." Silence. Martin Shaw. Legal counsel glanced down at his screen. His mouth moved slightly as he read, then stopped. Anya spoke first. "What you're seeing is a sample cut of recruitment outcomes across all mid to senior level roles since Q1 6 years ago." She tapped. Out of 193 hires, 171 came from 4 universities. 3 metro zip codes. All internal referrals. Less than 6% identify as Black or Hispanic 0 at VP level or above. Rosa blinked. "That doesn't account for applicant pools, does it?" Anya tilted her head, already prepared. We normalized against self-reported demographics from applicant tracking systems. Over 3,800 qualified applicants from underrepresented groups were processed. Less than 80 reached the second round. 4 received offers. Elias walked slowly along the back of the room, fingers brushing the edge of the long table. "What does that tell you?" he asked softly. No one answered. He tapped again. Another feed loaded audio excerpts, short clips from past interviews. Small things out of context but telling laughter at the wrong moment, pauses where none should be. A hiring manager asking a woman with a PhD in strategy if she was comfortable with Excel. Then he paused on one particular clip, Leah Jennings. Same tone, same clipped smile, different candidate, same conclusion. "She was consistent," Elias said. "I'll give her that." Martin exhaled. "What action are you proposing?" Elias looked at him, not angry, just surgical. "I'm not proposing anything. I'm informing you. This isn't a blip. It's systemic behavior." Masked as corporate instinct, he turned toward the far window. Sunlight catching the silver in his hair. "You all hired people who looked the part. Spoke the code, fit the template. And you thought that meant culture, but what it really meant was comfort." Rosa finally sat down. Elias continued. "There's a reason I didn't start with a public address. I wanted to know what this place was underneath its polish." He turned back to face them. "And now I do." Another screen appeared, this time a live internal message draft titled Lexmore Culture Statement, Interim Restructure Notice. At the bottom, 2 names already marked for removal. He didn't point at them. He didn't have to. "You have 90 minutes to finalize internal logistics. Comms goes out by end of day." Martin spoke voice low, and the candidates passed over. "We'll reach out selectively. Privately, and I'll handle the one that matters." He looked at Anya, send a runner to the lobby. "If Naomi Wells is still nearby, ask if she has a moment." At exactly 11:29, the door opened again. Leah Jennings entered first, hair immaculate, blouse pressed, still adjusting a silver bracelet as if this were just another status sync. Brian Garrettson followed, already chuckling at some half-told anecdote about a client typo. The sound died as soon as they stepped in. No screen, no slide deck, no chairs pulled for them. Just Elias Munro standing at the far end of the table, arms folded, gaze unreadable. Leah hesitated. "We weren't told what this was about." "You will be," Elias said. Anya stepped forward without preface. This morning at 10:00 a.m., Naomi Wells sat for a scheduled interview in room 7. The interaction was observed and recorded per standard protocol under the Equity Accountability Policy introduced last quarter. Leah blinked. "That was still in draft, wasn't it?" "Not anymore," Anya said. Elias moved closer to the table, slow but deliberate. She was asked if she applied to the right position. Brian opened his mouth, closed it. She was interrupted, mid-answer, redirected without engagement, and dismissed after being told falsely that the position was filled overnight. Leah's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't feel like the right fit she offered. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Define fit." Brian jumped in, voice rising with corporate urgency. "We had an internal candidate, late referral, very strong," which arrived after Naomi was already in the lobby. Elias cut in. No response. He let the silence grow legs. "You didn't question her qualifications. You questioned her existence in that room. You didn't ask for clarity. You asked for compliance." Leah's composure cracked just slightly. There was a gap in her resume, a significant one. Elias's voice didn't rise. She took care of her dying father. For 22 months, she also led 2 Fortune 500 campaigns, mentored junior strategists across 3 continents, and managed teams larger than your entire division. That's not a gap. That's a record. Brian looked down. Leah crossed her arms. "You don't get to talk around this." Elias said, voice now like steel wrapped in velvet. "You were given a moment to show leadership, and you chose dismissal." A pause. And the irony. She wasn't even there for the job. She was there for the truth. Leah frowned. "What do you mean?" "She's my wife," Elias said. The room turned to ice. No one moved. He let the words hang like smoke, then walked to the console and tapped once. A short audio clip played just 12 seconds. Leah's voice asking Naomi if she'd considered digital agility in her age bracket. Click. Silence. Elias turned back. This isn't personal, it's structural, but structures only change when people stop pretending. These moments are misunderstandings. Brian was pale now. Leah reached for her tablet but stopped halfway. Elias stepped aside. Anya slid a document across the table. Effective immediately, your roles are under review. You will not be included in the leadership transition announcement here. Leah's voice trembled. Are we being fired? No. Elias replied, you're being seen. And if that feels like punishment, perhaps that says more than I ever could. He didn't wait for response, just turned to the door. Behind it, the hallway waited. And somewhere down that hall, Naomi was walking back in, not to be evaluated, but to speak. The lobby didn't feel different. Same marble floors, same glass doors, same security badge scanner at the turnstile. But Naomi felt different. She walked in with the same heels, same blazer, same calm gaze, but everything about her pace had shifted. This wasn't an entrance, it was a return. This time, no one asked her to wait. A man in a slate gray suit met her at the front with a clipboard tucked to his side. Ms. Wells, Mr. Monroe is expecting you. Please follow me. She said nothing, just nodded once. They walked down a side corridor she hadn't seen before. No open workspace noise, no passing glances, just framed awards on the walls, industry accolades, client testimonials, mission statements, etched into steel. The air here was quieter, not like the sterile chill of the main office. This was stillness, the kind you only find where decisions are made. He stopped in front of a glass door with floor-to-ceiling views of the Chicago skyline. Inside sat 5 people: Elias, Anya Rosa from HR, and 2 senior partners. Naomi hadn't met. Elias stood when she entered, not out of formality, but out of recognition. She nodded to him, not quite a smile, but enough, then turned her gaze to the others. This won't take long, she said calmly, placing her leather folder on the table. One of the partners, a woman in her 50s with copper earrings and sharp eyes, leaned forward. Miss Wells, before we begin, let me say what happened this morning was not reflective of this firm's values. Naomi didn't blink. With respect, she said it was. The room paused. She continued. Values aren't what's printed in annual reports. They're what show up in real rooms with real people when no one thinks it matters. Another beat of silence. I wasn't looking for validation when I walked in here. I know what I bring into a room. And frankly, if that intimidates people, that's their work to do, not mine. Elias watched her, not intervening, not directing, just witnessing. Naomi turned slightly toward Rosa. I took time off. 2 years. My father was dying. I didn't miss a deadline. I missed meals to hold his hand. I managed medications instead of market plans. But what I didn't do was lose who I am. One of the partners opened his mouth, but Naomi continued. You say you're building inclusive culture. Great, but real inclusion doesn't happen in PR campaigns. It happens when someone like me walks in and isn't asked to shrink. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The quiet was heavier than any shout. I'm not here to be a symbol. I'm not a checkbox. I'm not a risk worth taking. I'm a record of results. Elias finally spoke. Would you still consider taking the role? The real one. Naomi looked at him, then at the others. She didn't answer right away. I didn't come back here for a position. She said I came for clarity. She closed her folder, and now I have it. Anya looked up. Just to clarify, was that a no? Naomi stood. It's a not here. She turned to Elias. We're good. He gave a slow, quiet nod. Always. Naomi walked out without looking back. But this time the hallway wasn't a corridor. It was a declaration. Not of leaving, but of choosing. The next morning, Naomi sat in a quiet corner booth at a cafe that smelled like nutmeg and fresh ambition. Her laptop was open. Her notes were already sorted. A single name sat bold at the top of the screen. Northline Strategies. She hadn't told many people yet. Just a handful from her old network. Former clients, a few partners, one journalist she trusted, but already her inbox had 4 warm leads. 3 of them opened with the same phrase. Heard you're back in the game. She wasn't back. She was building. The idea wasn't new. It had lived in the back of her head for years, scribbled in notebooks, sketched on napkins, whispered to herself at 2 a.m., after long corporate calls that drained more than they delivered. But now it had a pulse. Northline would focus on brand architecture, consumer positioning, and narrative integrity. But more than that, it would center voices usually cut out of the room before the conversation started. It wasn't about diversity, Dex, it was about power. Strategic, measured, unapologetic power. The kind that didn't ask to belong. She sipped her coffee. Someone passed by the window and did a double take. A barista approached quietly. "Miss Wells." Naomi looked up. "I just wanted to say my sister told me what happened." "She works at Lexmore, said you handled it like a damn masterclass." Naomi smiled just slightly. "Thank you." The barista hesitated, then set a second cup down. On the house. When the woman walked away, Naomi stared at the steam curling from the cup. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel vindicated. What she felt was clearer. The kind of clarity that doesn't beg or bend. She opened a fresh document. Typed a mission statement without edits. Every word had been living inside her long before the room ever doubted her. "We don't build brands to impress. We build them to endure, with story, with truth, with spine." Her phone buzzed. Elias. They offered another meeting, PR's idea. "I declined for you." She smiled. No reply. He knew her better than anyone, knew what kind of no this was. Not bitter, not performative. Just final. There would be no more revisits, no more compromises that asked her to be grateful for opportunities. She built herself 10 times over. No more understatements about what she was capable of. She wasn't walking away. She was walking forward. Her way. No spotlight, no headlines. Just impact. Just results. Later that evening, Naomi sat at her kitchen table with a stack of printouts and a pen. Her strategy deck was halfway built. Logos drafted. Contracts templated. A modest plan for the first 90 days. Julian walked in and kissed the top of her head. "How's the empire?" Naomi didn't look up. "Under construction." He laughed. "Name is Strong Northline." She nodded. "It's where everything points." Quietly, unshakably. He sat beside her. "You think it'll matter?" She finally looked at him. "It already does." The scent of rosemary and something roasted hung thick in the kitchen. The lights were low, golden, softened by dusk sneaking through the window blinds. Naomi stood at the counter, slicing lemons. Her movements were slow, precise, the way you move when your body remembers how to rest again. Behind her, Elias poured bourbon over ice. No words yet, just the quiet of familiarity, the kind only two people who've been through enough to stop performing ever really share. "You know," he said, leaning against the fridge, "when I asked you to go to that interview, I wasn't testing you." Naomi didn't look up. She dropped a lemon slice into the pot. A soft hiss rose as citrus met heat. "I know," she said, "you were testing them." He chuckled under his breath. "Didn't think they'd fail that fast." Cameras were rolling. "That's because you still give people the benefit of the doubt." She turned off the stove. Steam swirled up in ribbons. "They saw what they wanted to see," she said. A resume with a pause, a woman who didn't look like their last hire, and they made a decision before I spoke a word. Elias walked over and rested a hand lightly on her back. It wasn't for comfort, it was acknowledgement. "You didn't flinch, even in that boardroom." Naomi smiled softly, barely. Still doesn't mean silent. They stood there for a moment, not filling the air with anything unnecessary. The best rooms don't always need conversation, just presence. Then Elias asked, "They offered it, didn't they?" Naomi poured the tea into 2 ceramic mugs. "They did. And..." She handed him one. "I told them I had a better offer." He raised his eyebrows. "Did you tell them it was yours?" "I didn't need to," she said. "They saw it when I stood." They sat down at the table, bare wood, no placemats. Elias took a sip and exhaled. "You think it'll matter?" he asked. "One firm, one story." Naomi stared into her cup. "It's not the story, it's how we tell it, who we tell it to, and when." He nodded. The ice in his glass cracked quietly. She continued. You know what I realized? The same people who taught us to be patient were the ones hoping we'd stay quiet. That landed like a pin dropped in a cavern. Elias didn't respond. Just reached across the table, laced his fingers with hers. The world outside was still moving. Emails still flying, press teams still drafting statements they hoped would get ahead of what already spread. Naomi didn't care. She had nothing left to prove. She had everything left to build. And in this kitchen with lemon steam in the air and no audience in sight, she felt the most powerful she'd felt in years. Not because she won, but because she walked away before they even knew the game had changed. The doorbell rang at 7:46 p.m. Not loud, not urgent, just deliberate. Naomi wiped her hands on a linen cloth, crossed the hall barefoot, and opened the front door. It was Carla Ruiz, senior partner at Lexmore, standing in heels that had seen a long day holding a plain white envelope. "I didn't want to send this by email," Carla said quietly. "It's formal acknowledgement of how things were handled and how they shouldn't have been." Naomi didn't take it. Carla's hand hesitated in the air, then slowly dropped. "There's a letter. And a statement signed by the board. I know it won't undo anything." Naomi tilted her head slightly. Not unkindly, just listening. "I'm not here to ask for grace," Carla added. "I just wanted you to know we saw it. All of it. Not just the clip, the pattern, the silence. The way we let it happen." Naomi finally spoke soft, steady. "That's a start," she said. Carla nodded. The kind of nod you give when you're on the edge of apology, but no words will only carry so far. Naomi looked her in the eye. "But remember this," she said. "Respect doesn't come in a folder." Silence stretched between them, neither hostile nor warm. Just honest. Carla turned to go, then paused at the top step. "For what it's worth," she added, voice barely above a whisper, "they're scared now. Not of you, of being seen." Naomi gave the smallest nod and closed the door. Back in the kitchen. Elias was scrolling his phone, one leg stretched out. Bourbon, long finished. "Anything new?" Naomi asked, returning to the table. He glanced up. "Someone from Eastbridge Capital messaged me, said they're interested in you. Heard she doesn't play games, just delivers." Their words. Naomi smirked. "Tell them I don't do games. I build the board." Elias grinned. "I'll pass it along." They sat in silence again. But this time the quiet wasn't heavy. It was whole. The kind of quiet you only earn after walking through rooms where you weren't expected to speak, but chose to anyway. Naomi didn't win anything that week. Not in the way people measure wins. No headlines, no press tour, no LinkedIn post with a humble brag, and 20 hashtags. She just kept moving, built something no one could gatekeep, and chose again and again not to shrink. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever been misjudged, overlooked, or underestimated, if you've ever walked into a room and been told in so many silent ways that you didn't belong, remember this. You don't need permission to lead. You don't have to wait for a seat. You can build your own table. Your presence is not a favor, it's a fact. And the world changes when you stop asking to be seen and start showing up anyway. Subscribe for more stories that reveal what's beneath the surface. Not just success, but strength. Not just justice, but clarity. Not just endings, but new starts.